Welcome to the third and final episode of the Win class series. I'm sure you can tell by the different theme that I'm using that I haven't recorded in a while, and the second episode is like a couple of days back. So today I'm finally going to finish this series and finish explaining all the remaining methods. What did we go through in the first two episodes? First of all, the fields or class variables, how the new method works, the testing subclass or a nested class, a bunch of low-level methods, as well as their static variants, some of the, or rather three methods that are already really useful. But we stopped at close once exists, looked at this and got scared. So today I am going to explain how this works. But not just yet, because I know you're gonna click off that way. I'm gonna start out with the more exciting stuff. So, run act. What is the reason for this method to exist? We already have run, okay, which runs some application. Simple enough, but when I run something, I also want it to be activated. So let's imagine I have some link here, like let's do GHM, which is the link to my GitHub. By the way, I leave it in the description of every single one of my videos. And then I do alt-click on it. Well, thing is, often what would happen is the link opens, sure, and then my browser blinks orange, but doesn't actually activate, which is pretty damn annoying. Which is why I actually have a function that runs a link. Let's actually look at it. Run link, I think it's called. It would make sense if it did. Which essentially runs the link and then also activates the browser. So the idea for run act, let's go to it, is that actually this. Not only do I want to run the app, I also want to make sure that it's active. So first of all, it does the run. Pretty simple. And then it activates the window. Amazing. Let me show you an example of where I use it. So I have this function called main apps. Whenever I restart my computer, this function gets ran, where it activates the 5 of my most used windows, which I want on pretty much always, so I don't have to manually start them. And why do I need to activate them as well? Good question, because if I just run them, then one after the other, they get ran, and now like 5 windows are blinking orange. So I still have to activate each one of them so they stop fucking blinking. But if I activate them immediately, so I run them and activate them, none of them will blink orange. You might think that run act is essentially a weird function or a weird method to make things not blink orange, and you would partly be right, but it's also for thread consistency. It's probably not a thing that you say, but what I mean by thread consistency is you run act some app inside of some function. So first it does some logic, then it run acts an app, and then does some logic. Because you activate that window, you don't need to think or worry about that window not being activated. So all of your logic after it will work for sure. Runact is very, very nice. Runact folders. So if you use runact, what you have to specify for it to work is let's actually go here. You need the win title and the exe path. Well, if you want to runact a folder, so say the C volume, well, the win title of it is exactly the same as the exe of it. You just run C : /, and that's the win title as well. So why would we need to specify the same thing twice? That's pretty stupid. There's not really a need. So we can just specify the win title, and that will become the exe that we run. So the default off run option, going a bit on a round trip here, is by default max. And usually when you run apps like VS Code, for example, you want that window to be maximized. By default, I don't want my Explorer window to be maximized. I want it to be small, unless I specifically request it to be maximized by default. So if you don't set anything, then it's minimized. Cool. Actually, this might be a leap of logic because it will always have at least something which is max, so it will never get here. Huh, well, that's certainly interesting. Yeah, technically this block is pretty stupid. Well, ignore it then. So, how we get to actually setting the exe path automatically. We use set explorer win title, which, I guess you provide exe path and then it gets the win title automatically. Same thing, different way. So it says the win title by getting the exe path and then having hk_exe explorer.exe. Boom, that's it. So that's done automatically. The only thing that you need to provide here is the exe path. And then you runact it as usual. So this is essentially syntax trigger, so you don't have to specify the same thing 2 times. App. That is probably my favorite function, maybe even that I ever wrote. I think the entire idea of the win class is what I like the most about the things that I wrote. Probably not my favorite function though. So, how this works. I think I explained this in the first episode. So currently I have this VS Code window, and I have a hotkey for it. Here it is. When I press Alt-A, then it apps the win object of VS Code. Once again, if you're not sure how this works, you can watch my first and second episodes, and then those will get you up to speed. So currently this window is active. I press Alt-A, it's now minimized. I press Alt-A again while VS Code is not active, it's minimized. Now it's active again. And let's close the window. Now it doesn't exist. I press Alt-A, it actually runs it and makes sure that it's active. So that's pretty much what it does. If it min-maxes, so essentially, if the window exists, then it min-maxes, which I once again explained in a previous episode. Otherwise, it runs active. runacts it. Difficult to speak, truly. So amazing, truly amazing. And the same formula that we had for runact is for folders as well. No need to specify the win title if it's exactly the same as the path. So this hotkey, which is Alt D for me, does the app method, but for a folder instead. And for this, I don't have to specify the win title. I only need to specify the exit path. So this essentially works the same exact way as this. And let's actually go here and delete this, because I am pretty sure this does absolutely nothing. Okay. Before we go on any longer, let's actually explore this method. So, to close, if in the run method we specified a to close, or a window that you want to close as soon as it appears, we call close once exists. Why not the other method? Once again, second episode, watch it. So, I make use of set timers to not occupy the thread. We still wait for the window to appear, but everything else can still do what it needs to do. So, first of all, we get the current tick count. And tick count is a very nice way to measure time. It's still not precise due to how HK works, but good enough already. So the current tick count is now. Now we get this wait time, which by default, I think I set it to 2 minutes or 120 seconds. And we multiplied by 1,000. Because tick count is in milliseconds. And yeah, we essentially convert seconds to milliseconds. And what appears out of this is the tick count on the other end of the waiting time. So the current tick count is now, and what we get from this is wait until when. And it's stored in this variable. Cool. Now we have two cool things that we can use. So first of all, to close by default is a empty string, but it also could be an empty array, because maybe you only have one window that you want to close as soon as some app starts, but maybe you have more than one. So for example, in GIMP, I think there is some window that may appear, but it's only one of them. But in Steam, there are at least two that I have noticed. A deals window and something else, which I don't quite remember. Oh, news. So I want to close both of them if they exist. So for this, I can specify an array. But if it's one, I specify a string for to close. Okay. And depending on whether I set a string or an array, the set timer keeps calling different functions, which are a bit below. And it calls them every 20 milliseconds. The reason why I didn't set it to 1 millisecond is because 20 is already fast enough, like incredibly fast. I have shown off how this works in a previous video, and the window disappeared immediately. No need to harvest more resources than 20 milliseconds, which is already a bit too fast maybe. But I like fast, so here we go. Now, if we didn't actually specify a to close, wait, hold on. Yes, if we specified some wrong type that maybe is even false, then we get an error that I specified here. So maybe you give a number of 0. It's probably not going to be a string, and it doesn't really make sense. Well, it doesn't make sense because even if it's a handle, it won't be 0. So this is essentially a error to tell you, yo, you specified something incorrectly, fix it. There are a few situations in this whole class where applying this logic works, and when it does, I love it. So, some safety. Now, try close array. This function gets called when you specify an array for to this close. So, since to close is now an array, we go through the array and check if each window exists. So if either of them exists, well, yeah. If one of them exists, it gets closed and it stops the set timer. And if both of them appear at the same time, then both of them will be closed. All right, but remember stop waiting at this variable. This is essentially the end of waiting. If we went over that time, which we calculated here, then that means we timed out. We don't need to check anymore, and we just close the set timer. So this whole function gets called every 20 milliseconds. Cool, and now we have try close. This function gets called every 20 milliseconds when we specify a string. And it does the same thing, but without the for loop, essentially. If the window exists, close it and delete the set timer. If it doesn't exist, and instead we timed out, also delete the timer. So while this function is pretty messy, I agree, it does the close once exists thing that I wanted perfectly. So for that reason, I love it. And actually, you can call this method outside of run. Maybe some window appearing doesn't coincide with you running some other window. Maybe you just know that at some point some window will appear, and you just want to keep track of it and close it as soon as possible. You can use this. And this can be extrapolated into running indefinitely. So maybe use KM player, and every other time that you open it, it shows some window that says, oh, updated, or something like that. Well, you can use close once exist to automatically close it. But for that to work, you would have to remove the set timers. So all of those. Not sure how to make it so it's not clunky yet, because I don't really like global set timers that never stop. But yeah, to use it like that, you would just remove the set timers and the check for timing out, because you would never time out. Or you would set, right, you could just set an infinite wait time. And here you go. Cool. Restore left right. So you know how when you press Windows left or right, it moves the window here or here. Thing is, sometimes you press the right side and it doesn't actually move it to the right. It might move it to the left. And also it creates a window here that lets you select the other window to put beside the left window. That's pretty cool, but it only works sometimes, which is horrible. So I decided to reprogram that behavior so you can trust using win left and right. So let's go through this. This is actually one of my older functions. So I don't quite remember how it works. So we have a couple of functions. Two, to be precise, win move, which moves the window. Win move when min. So this is essentially win move, but only if the window is minimized. Cool. So let's go through the logic of the script like it actually goes. So if not, win get min max. In other words, what am I looking for? Hold on. Yeah, so win get min max returns whether the window is minimized or maximized. So if it's minimized, then just win move the window. Yeah. So let's go through win move. First of all, we grab the screen width and divide it by 2. Now in half screen, we get the middle of the screen. Cool. Now we figure out whether we called this whole function with the parameter of right or left for the direction. If we want to set the window to the right, then we start at that half screen that we got. But if left, then it's just 0, naturally. Cool. Now to resize the window and move it, we use win move. And this direction turned from right or left to the actual x coordinate, whether it's here or here. The y coordinate is 0, meaning the window stays at the top. What is this? This is the width of the window. So regardless of whether it goes to the left or right, it still needs to be half a screen. So it goes to the left, starts at 0, half a screen regardless. Goes to the right, it starts at the half screen, starts at 0, half a screen regardless. The height of the window is the screen height. Pretty simple. And we do this whole thing of win move on the win title. Cool. But what if this returned true, meaning the window is maximized? Well, unfortunately, this gets a bit more annoying because you can't move a maximized window. And you actually need to restore it down. So do this. And for that, I have a function that I explained in video 1 that does this whole thing. It it restores it down, essentially. And then we get a set timer that keeps checking, like, is it minimized already? Is it minimized? Is it minimized? And once it minimized, then it gets the green light to actually move it and resize it. So it calls this function, which keeps checking, are you minimized? Or to be more precise, it keeps checking, are you maximized? If it is, then it does nothing. But once this is false, this return doesn't get executed, and actually gets to the winMove function and then disables the timer that we set here. So pretty annoying structure, I understand, but yeah, essentially it needs to have the window restored down to be able to move it anywhere. And yeah, there is no, as far as I'm aware, win-weight min or win-weight max. I haven't found those, so we need to use a set timer for that. I mean, I guess a while loop could work, but once again, I don't like occupying the thread if I don't need to. Huge function. All right, let's continue. Active Regex. So, you know how there are group adds that you can create a group and then add some win title, right? What I hate about this is that group add is not object oriented. The groups just exist in the global space, and it's really annoying having to work with them. So, blah. When you want to target a bunch of windows, and maybe you don't have an option to use group add, you would then have to use Regex for your set title match mode. But I personally don't want to use Regex throughout my whole script. I only need it in a couple of places. So I use this method to check if a window is active, but to here, instead of specifying the usual win title, I specify a Regex win title. So this function is simply for that. Checking if a Regex win title is active or not. I think I don't use this anymore. I found some other way, but it's pretty useful, at least for me. And the final function, are active. So active Regex, but for multiple windows, and also not Regex anymore. Essentially, instead of using a group, you can just specify an array as the win titles thing. Let's actually look at it. Win titles. Boom. Here they are. Empty array by default. You can specify an array of win titles that you want to check whether any of them are active. So I have 3 windows currently open: VS Code, OBS, and the clock. Instead of adding each one of them to a group, I can just provide an array of this win title, this win title, and this win title, and check if any of those windows are active. Cool. How does this work? First of all, we specify I as 0. This is a counter that we use later. Now, for every value in the win titles array, we do this block. This block. So we'll come back to map later. First of all, we will check out the array, else if. So if we specified an array, then we check, like, is this window active? And if it is, I is now one thing bigger. However, this only checks for the win title. That's the only parameter that we can pass to it. But what if we have some exception? So maybe this window, so it has to contain Visual Studio Code and then hk_exe code.exe. But if this window has, I don't know, documents in its title, then we don't grab it. And for that, we have to specify a map instead, in which the key is the win title and the value is the exception. So essentially, so here's an array. This is in class scope, so this is just an example. Don't actually think about it. So like VS Code, and then like clock. And the way to do it with a map is you create a map, now VS Code, but not documents, then clock, but not clockuments. Yeah, and you provide this to make this and this exceptions. And if any of the windows that you provided in either the array or the map, if at least one of them exists, I will be incremented by 1 and it will return 1. And the whole function of rActive will return true. Well, it will return 1, but HK doesn't care whether it's true or 1. And here you go. And that's pretty much it for the whole class. Wow, it took 3 videos, but I think it's worth it. If you're interested in how I use those, all of those methods with a bunch of stuff, you can look through my main repository. It's essentially my personal project where all of my hotkeys and whatever else are specified. Once again, I leave a link to my GitHub profile in the description always. So you can go ahead and look at main. And then main, once again, and here are all the scripts that have the hotkeys and so on. The usual stuff that I have is the Alt-A that I have shown off to you today. It does the app of VS Code, then C for browser. I have none of the other windows active, so I'm not going to show them off. OBS I'm currently doing, but you won't see. But the clock works. Here it is. Then Alt-D for the C volume, or overall the Explorer. Unfortunately, when you try to get the win title of the Explorer, it returns explorer.exe. Okay, cool, you'd think that that would work. Well, no, unfortunately, because if you make this window active and get it, well, fuck, it's Explorer as well. So you can't really be precise with the Explorer window, which is really annoying. But the C volume is the closest way to get to it. So if the window is called downloads, well, you're kind of fucked. But if you go to C and then users, your username, and then downloads, now it works. As a programmer, I'm incredibly annoyed that it works that way. Yeah. So, if you learned anything new, I'm sure you did, leave a like, type some comment, maybe you have a question or an idea of how to use this class, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss more of my content. I hope you have a good day, and goodbye.